Hi beauties, Rosy here from rosypeña.com, a sewing and style blog. Today I'm here with a Q&A video. So I asked you guys on Instagram if you had any questions for me, and I told you I would answer them for you here on YouTube. So that's what I'm doing today. Thankfully I had a bunch of questions, so I'm going to go ahead and go through each of them now. I have my phone handy, so I'm just going to scroll through and I'm going to say the Instagram handle of the person who asked the question. So yeah, if you would like to see this Q&A video, just go ahead and keep watching. So the first question comes from SOFIESDY. She says, did you go to any sewing course or are you self-taught? Do you have any other interests other than sewing? So the answer to that question is I am self-taught. I taught myself to sew in 2014. Just by books and YouTube, and basically just going out and getting a machine and just getting started. I was about 6 months into my sewing whenever I discovered Mimi G Style here on YouTube, and from then on it was just nose deep into sewing. So she's definitely what really sunk me in. First started, I was sewing just little girl garments. So once I discovered Mimi G Style, it kind of just opened my eyes to garment sewing for adults. And so I definitely got more into that after discovering her. And then, so yeah, I'm self-taught through YouTube and through books and things like that. I've never had any professional training as far as learning how to sew or anything like that. She also says, do I have any other interests other than sewing? Hobby-wise, that's basically the only thing that keeps me occupied. Sewing and blogging, and obviously design. So kind of all my focus just goes to pattern design and sewing. So if I'm not with my children, then I'm sewing or learning pattern drafting. So the next question comes from Sunshine32. She says, what is a pattern making tool that you couldn't live without? And the first thing that comes to mind is definitely a seam gauge, but what kind of goes hand in hand with that is a chalk roller. So definitely my seam gauge and my chalk roller kind of do the same function to just add the seam allowance. So definitely my seam gauge and my chalk roller. So Deborah L. Jackson asked, she actually has a few questions. So one of her questions is, why did you start sewing? So like I said, I started sewing in 2014, and it was basically because I had just got out of a relationship and I had just had my daughter. So she was only 6 months old whenever I started sewing. It was a rough time in my life and I knew I needed to do something to keep me occupied. So I've always loved clothes and things like that, and I would always make like little hair bows and stuff for my daughters. Sewing was just kind of something that I knew that I would be interested in. That's why I started sewing, was because I needed to clear my headspace and do something creative. That's also kind of the reason why I started my blog as well, to give me a creative space to share the things that I was making and to also inspire other people. Deborah also asked, you have such great style and taste in fabric choice. Where do you draw your influence for your style? So influence for me usually just comes from Pinterest or Instagram or things like that. As far as style goes, I kind of already have like my own personal style figured out. I really like just casual and chic kind of things, but I also love to just test the limits and try new stuff. So like I said, I love being casual, but I'm also not afraid to try new things. So whenever trends do come around, I do usually try to just dabble with them just to see if it's something that I would like. But there's definitely also trends that I just stay away from. So just inspiration usually just comes from Pinterest. Pinterest really inspires me. Victoria Beckham is somebody that I really look up to as far as style. I don't think she's ever wore anything that I didn't like. So she's kind of like my style icon. But yeah, just sometimes I'll skim through magazines and things like that. But really just Pinterest and Instagram. There's so many great creators out there that I love to follow and I love to watch. Okay, so Deborah's last question is, do you have any intention of becoming a pattern designer? And the answer to that is definitely yes. I would love to become a pattern designer, but I know that I need to just hone down on that skill and really learn the ins and outs of it before I try to come out with a sewing pattern. But pattern design is definitely something that I'm interested in, and hopefully whenever it gets to that point where I can launch a pattern, hopefully you guys will love it. So yeah, definitely pattern design is something that I'm very interested in. Photo Express 827 asks, do you have anyone who is your sewing inspiration, any must-have sewing books or blogs to follow? Love your work and you're very beautiful. Thank you so much for your comment. So sewing inspiration, definitely, like I said, from Pinterest and things like that. But as far as bloggers and sewing inspiration from that, obviously I love Mimi G Style like I mentioned, but Erica Bunker is also somebody that I kind of just cling to from the beginning, and I would love seeing everything that she had to make. So Mimi G and Erica Bunker, definitely my sewing inspiration. And as far as sewing books, It's really hard with sewing books because a lot of them they all kind of repeat the same thing as far as for beginners. So there's not really one that I would just pick because, like I said, they're all very repetitive and they all kind of just give you the same information as far as beginner sewing books. But so I would honestly just say to pick one book that shows that it's dedicated for sewing and kind of stick to that. So I can't really think of any off the top of my head, but in the blog post to the video, I'll try to link to a few of them that I think would be really helpful. The next question is from Roxy808, and she says, how long have you been sewing and blogging? So I've been sewing since 2014, so a few years now, and I've been doing it pretty much every day since then. There was a time where I kind of skipped a little bit just because other things were going on, and there are those times where you kind of lose your sewing mojo. So I know if you're a sewer for any amount of time, you've probably been through that, where you kind of just go through a period where you just lose all inspiration to sew. But usually, thankfully for me, those usually don't last too long, maybe a few weeks or so. But I've pretty much been sewing consistently since 2014. And as far as blogging, I've been blogging for a little over a year now. I started in April of 2016. So Andrea.ob says, hi Rosie, my question is, how did you start sewing and blogging? And is it a job for you or just a hobby? So the answer to that is it's pretty much just a hobby. There is little things that I can monetize from as far as like ads and things like that, but nothing to hold a reliable income from. So it definitely is currently just a hobby, but it is something that I enjoy doing so much. But whenever I'm posting outfit posts for you guys, it's purely just what I'm making and I'm sharing it with you and things like that. So pretty much my blogging is just a hobby. So Dari from That Style though said, nice broom. My question for you is, what's your process for fitting your garments and what are your personal resources for that? I'm curious if you measure the pattern first or if you go by the final measurement and then just adjust as needed afterwards. Sometimes the final measurements don't feel as accurate, and that could be because of choice of fabric. But I'm curious about how do you fit your own body. So fit is one of those questions that sewing bloggers get so often. I remember right out of the gate, that was some of the first questions that I would get from my readers is, how do I fit my garments? And to be honest, especially in the beginning, I never tried to do any kind of fitting, and thankfully I was lucky to have the patterns mostly just fit me right out of the pack. What I do as far as fit is I usually just go by the finished garment measurement that is printed on the actual pattern. So on the back of the envelope, they'll have your bust measurements and things like that, and they'll categorize you into a certain size based on your bust measurement or your hip measurement. But usually whenever you go by that, it puts you into a category that is probably going to be too big for you most of the time, or too small, it depends. But if I was to usually go by my size based on my bust and my hip, it would have me in usually like a size 10 or a 12. But if I was to sew a size 12, it would be definitely too big on me. So I always go by the finished garment measurement that is on the actual pattern piece. So also whenever I'm sewing the important seams, like the side seams or things like that, I always baste it first, because that way I can try it on and see if it's going to fit. And then once I get the fit down, maybe I'll need to take in a little bit more, or maybe I'll need to let it out. It'll be much easier to do that if you basted the seams first as opposed to actually sewing them in. There are definitely really great fit books out there that I always hear other people recommend, so I'll also link those in the blog post as well. Okay, so Dreaming of Makeup 88 says, when you first started sewing, were you discouraged, and if so, what made you keep going? How did you get better? Sewing is basically like a skill, so whenever you're learning a new skill, there is always going to be times where you kind of get discouraged about things. So definitely, yes, there are plenty of times where I got discouraged as far as sewing. But my best tip for that is whenever you're feeling discouraged, walk away. Don't sew a project whenever you're feeling discouraged, because 90% of the time it's just going to come out and kind of be a mess. So whenever you're tired, don't sew either. So those are things that I've learned over the past few years. Don't sew when you're tired, and don't sew when you're discouraged, because your final project is not going to come out very well. So yeah, there's definitely been times where I've been discouraged. Like I said, there's so many projects that I've gone through where there's no way I could have even worn that. There's nobody out there that sews something and then is just right out of the gate perfect at it. But my advice for you as far as what to do if you're ever feeling discouraged is just get up and walk away, and then know that the next day or whenever you can come back to your project. You'll have a clear head, and then you'll be able to finish your project hopefully. But if not, don't be discouraged, because it's just fabric and you can always purchase more and then just try again at the project. Or move on to something else. If something is a total complete failure, it might just be that kind of pattern style that isn't working for you. So just go on to a new pattern. But just always remember that it's just fabric and it's all a learning process. So every time you do a mistake, you're learning from it. And the best thing that you can do from that is just grow and keep growing. Trish Goody asked, what do you do with your scrap fabric? So I've always held on to my scrap fabric. So I have bags of them and really just nothing that I can make anything large from. So I'm still kind of trying to figure out what to do with my scrap fabrics. So if any of you guys have any suggestions as far as what to do with them, let me know in the comments below. But for my scraps, I just keep them in bags. But like I said, whenever I sew a project, I usually just try to buy as close as I can to what I actually need. So I usually don't have too much scrap fabric left over, but whenever I do, I just put it in a bag and it's kind of just sitting away in a closet. Okay, so the next question comes from Lehanro on Instagram, and she's asking me in my direct message. She's saying, how do you come up with the content you are going to share in So Def Mag? So if you haven't heard, it's a multicultural sewing magazine that me and a few other girls are featured in monthly. So it's called So Def Magazine. I'll link it in the description bar below. And she's asking me, how do I come up with the content for that magazine? So as many of you may know, magazines usually have to work in advance. So whenever I'm thinking of content, I'm usually just trying to think of what kind of interesting things are going to be happening during that time of whenever the magazine is going to come out. Just kind of keep your ears open and kind of just figure out whatever's inspiring you, because whatever's inspiring you, you're going to definitely know what to write. If you choose a topic that you're not really that passionate about, then the odds are it's going to translate into your content. So always just try to stick to things that you're passionate about and that you know other people might want to read. So the next question comes from Emily M. Sews, and she says, hi Rosie, your sewing is great. What did you use to learn how to draft patterns? So the majority of the knowledge that I have as far as pattern drafting is all learned from craftsy.com. So I'll link that into the blog post to the video. There's classes on there from a lady named Susie Furr, and she has several classes on there on how to show you how to draft a bodice sloper, a sleeve sloper, pant sloper, and all kinds of other design hacks. That's where I learned the majority of my pattern drafting knowledge is from that. But there's also a few books that I've picked up along the way. So one of the major purchases, aside from the Craftsy classes that I got to help me out with pattern drafting, is this one here. It's called Pattern Making for Fashion Design. So this is another resource that definitely helps me out with pattern making. It's definitely a large textbook, so there's tons of knowledge in here as well. And there's also stuff in here on how to make a sloper as well. So if you don't want to get the Craftsy classes and you're more of like a hands-on book reader, then I would suggest getting this Pattern Making for Fashion Design. And I'll go ahead and link this in the blog post as well. So the last question that I have is from Rosy, and she says, I heard you said you live in Texas. My question is, how do you like Texas? So basically, Texas is great. So my only complaint as far as Texas is it's really hot over here. It gets so super hot. Especially in the summer, and not just like a dry heat like California or other places like that. So it's like a humid, sticky, muggy kind of heat. So that's my only complaint with Texas. Oh, so there's one more question from So Much Felicia, and she says, hi Rosie, how do you store your patterns? So if you watch my sewing room tour video, I will have shown you, it's basically a shelf that I have that's under my cutting table, and I just store my patterns in little bins. And I kind of just have them organized by tops, and then I have another box for pants and another box for dresses, and also a box for my indie patterns. But if you guys would like a more in-depth video as far as my sewing patterns and how I store them, and maybe just kind of see what patterns I have, I would definitely love to film that video for you guys. Okay guys, so I think I answered all of your questions. Let me know if you enjoyed this kind of video, and I'll definitely film more of them for you guys in the future. You guys had so many questions for me, which I'm so grateful for. And also I thought it was really cool that nobody asked the same question twice. Everybody kind of asked different questions, so I thought that was really cool. So thank you for everybody who asked a question, and hopefully you enjoyed this type of video. Let me know if you did in the comments below, and also like the video and subscribe if you haven't already. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye!
Where I wanna be.